All right, guys, so apparently I messed that up. I have to start over again, so I'm a little bit behind schedule. It's your man, Donald King. Pardon me. Got a little excited there. Apparently something went down the my mouth. It was watery. I was doing too much. Anywho, I have my Starbucks with me today, and I shall partake. Yo, so basically today's video, it's about today's podcast is going to be about the identity and or the internal narrative, the inner story, right? By the way, it's like I'm going to joke throughout all of this. I like to joke. I'm a funny person. No, no. I'm joking. It's the self-help videos. They encourage me. But no, I'm just messing around. But look here. And this is actually a point that I want to factor into what I'll be saying in this podcast. The sure sign of mental instability is taking oneself too seriously. If you can't laugh at yourself, and you can't laugh at how ridiculous you are, and all the silly things you do in order to connect with others and or demonstrate value to others, then it's a pretty sure indicator that you're towing the line of mental instability. All right? So, that brings us to the point of the identity and or the internal narrative. What is the identity? Well, the identity is the collection of meanings, symbols, stories, beliefs, habits, practices, ideals, behaviors, attitudes, outlooks, and sociological treatments and effects that individuals collect throughout the course of their lives and seek to self-actualize through. The identity is basically the story the individual tells themselves about the world around them and their place and value within it. All right? That is the identity. When I think about the identity, I tend to think of it as this little box, this little bubble that someone handed you at the time of birth, and you filled it with all these things, and it's like a little treasure chest that you use to try and navigate through life with and or by means of. All right? The identity is basically your most basic weapon and tool in society. It's your sword and shield. It's how you gain access to different cultures and organizations and networks of individuals. It's how you procure resources. Your identity is your most basic tool. You see, through the socialization process, we are trained, we're groomed to be raging narcissists. And something that I want you to understand about narcissism is no one's fault that this is sort of a default mode for humans. So whenever you hear me speak about narcissism, it's never from a place of judgment and sort of a holier than thou outlook. It has mostly to do with the fact that these individuals and individuals who suffer from narcissism, they're victims of the socialization process, okay? And basically narcissism, again, if you haven't seen my other videos, narcissism is an addiction to self-idealizing. It's an addiction to the identity and to enhancing the identity and protecting and defending the identity at all costs. Narcissism is an addiction. The inner story is tricky, man. It is tricky. What makes the inner story so tricky is that, well, most times the individual actors can't tell the difference between reality and the inner story. They can't tell the difference between the meanings they've internalized and the beliefs, habits, and practices they've internalized and know how to make sense of the world around them with, and what's actually happening in reality. You know, a lot of times I interact with a lot of very aggressive people. It just comes with the territory of being the thing I purport to be. But these people, they come to me trying to fight with all this hostility and aggression, and they don't know why. what I am and how I am, and then also how I look, it conflicts with their identity. It interrupts how they want to see themselves and the story they tell themselves about the world around them and their value and place within it. Someone's like, "Oh, you're not as smart as you are." And I'm like, "Oh yeah? Prove it. Make a case for what you just said." "No, you're just not as smart as you think you are. You're not great, Donald King." And I'm like, "I never said I was, but if you can find some error or some flaw in my reasoning, please expose it. I've been looking for someone to do that for quite some time." And see, it doesn't matter how kind I am to them. It doesn't matter how much sense I make. It doesn't matter how eloquently I speak or how hood I speak on the back end. It doesn't matter what I do to try and sway someone into recognizing and syncing up with the reality of who, how, and what I am, because they can't tell the difference between their feelings and beliefs and who and how I am and how I actually perform in reality. Do you know how many times people come to me and try to convince me that there is some way to disprove what I claim to be? And I'm like, sure, let's hear it. Let's break it all the way down. And they can never do that because here's the way that it works. The inner story, the internal narrative, it's expected to be consistent with reality. Again, truth is what is consistent with reality, and most people assume that their inner story is indicative of and or synced up with reality, when in fact the inner story, it's mechanically impossible for the inner story to sync up with reality because the inner story happens exclusively within idealism. And the reason why I mention that is simply this. Most people think that they hold out hope that at some point reality is going to sync up with their inner story. They hold out hope that reality at some point is going to sync up with their inner story. So they dissent against me. They refuse to acknowledge me for how I perform or what I'm able to do. And I don't want to make this exclusively about me, but it's like this is the most, I guess, readily available example. People see me make sense consistently. They see me make sense consistently, yet they hold out hope that at some point reality is going to come along and undo what I'm claiming, undo what I am, and prove that their inner story was right all along, and that they were right to be suspicious, and that they were right to be judgmental and aggressive. This is the way that it works mechanically. You see, when you deal in the inner story, you're never dealing with individuals. You're dealing with stories of individuals you come up with in your mind. If you've ever been in a debate before, you'll see that there's something called logical fallacies. Logical fallacies occur when individuals are not arguing against individuals or against others on topic or on the merits of discussion, but instead they're arguing against feelings and beliefs they form about the individual on the other side. Okay? So someone is like, this is how you are, and that's how you are, and this is how you are, and that's how you are, and you get into ad hominem. And then you get into, they say, "Oh, so you're basically saying this and you're basically saying that, and this is why you're wrong and that's why you're wrong, yeah. And then they get into straw man and red herring. The reason why is because they're not actually engaging the subjects themselves. They're instead engaging feelings and beliefs they manufacture from within their apperception and simply attributing what they've manufactured in their own minds to the individuals they're seeking to argue against. This is the way it works mechanically, people. Problem. The big problem. Scary thing about the inner story. It's fundamentally divorced from reality. Again, the inner story, it happens exclusively within idealism. Okay? Idealism is divorced from reality. It is not synced up with reality at all. So people are like, I don't know, and I guess, hold on, let me back up real quick. The reason why that's important is because when someone is living in their identity, when someone is lost in their internal narrative, there's nothing you can do to infiltrate their inner story. There's nothing you can do to infiltrate their inner story. The only thing you can hope to do in a situation where someone is lost in the inner story is bring them into reality in order to help them learn to differentiate between what's happening in their internal narrative and what's happening in reality. You have to do things to snap them into reality in order to get them to sort of take note of what's occurring outside their feelings and beliefs. A lot of times you guys will see me go back and forth with a lot of aggressive people who come to my posts. Again, narcissists, they come to me, they're mad. They get mad. A lot of times they get mad because they're under the impression that they should somehow be superior to me. They should be smarter than me. They should be more capable than me. On and on down the line. And when they see that they're not, they feel the need to try and attack and humble me and make me become consistent with and or subjugate me to their inner story. Right? And I kind of got off track where I was going with that, but I'll circle back to it in a second. When someone is living in their inner story, you can't access their inner story. The only thing you can do is try to get them to snap into reality. And that goes back to the point that I was making. The reason why you see me go back and forth with people is because 9 times out of 10, the only thing that makes humans snap into reality, the only thing that makes humans want to pay attention to what's going on outside of their inner story is you have to engage them through competition. You have to engage them through competition. And then after they gotten all this fight out of them, after they gotten all this rage and aggression out of them and they realize that they can't transfer it into you, there's this split second, this split moment in which they're accessible. A split moment in which they are not lost in the inner story. You know, I've been in several relationships before in my life. Some well before I was enlightened, and then others afterward, you know. Beautiful women, just amazing, stunning, extraordinary. I've been with extraordinary women in my life, right? And through all the arguments that I've had with all these ladies, you know, because it's like hell. Doesn't matter if you're enlightened, you're still going to reach points of disagreement, but through all the disagreement and discord that we've had, there was always a point where, and I guess if I were to summarize it, it was me trying to access their inner story. And I didn't realize this is what I was doing, but, you know, again, back in the day, especially like way back in the day, I used to be a toxic nice guy, right? And toxic nice guy is a person who acts like all nice, but is underneath it is very controlling and domineering and jealous and mean and all these other things. That's a toxic nice dude. So the reason I mention this is because my old way of interacting with people used to be trying to access people's inner story through acts of kindness. And you'd be good to people and you'd try and do all these other things to get them to recognize your value. And at the end of the day, especially like in some of the, I want to say something, it's just like, you do all these things to try and get someone to recognize your value and then the value that you bring to their life. And then, unfortunately, a lot of times it doesn't matter what you do, you cannot change the story they tell themselves about you and the value you bring to their life, right? You know, I was with someone for 8 years. Someone for 8 whole years. And I could go down a laundry list of things that I did to try and prove that I was I was good and worthy of love and consideration and adoration and all this shit. And at the end of the day, I had no control over the story they told themselves about me, in no way to affect it or change the outcome of how they saw me through this inner dialogue that they had. Hard lesson learned, man. Hard lesson learned. And I know I got a little bit personal with that one, but at the end of the day, it really boils down to you not having the power to change someone's identity. You know, I think that's why a lot of people get into relationships. Ironically, it goes back to the post that or the podcast I put up about relationships. It goes back to the podcast I put up about relationships, because most people, they get into relationships hoping to compete against mates. They want someone to impress, and then once they feel they've impressed someone or impressed upon someone their value, they immediately lose interest. That's what happens in all toxic relationships. You think you find someone who's going to, I don't know, rock your world. What you're actually in is something I refer to in my work as a state of posturing, wherein you want to demonstrate value to someone. You're like, hey, you're worthy of my best effort. I want to prove to you how valuable I am for however long we're together. But the goal is actually to capture authority from you. I want to make you my submissive, and I want to dominate you. That's what competition is. Competition is an attempt to dominate another. And all relationships, or at least most human relationships, because they're based in parasitism, they're basically these roundabout contests to try and dominate someone. Hey, I love you so much, I love you so much, which ultimately translates into, hey, I love you. Oh, Jesus Christ, these guys are so terrible. I hate when people need attention this bad. Hold on, just 1 second, folks. I will never understand that. But anywho, so, you know, these people that get into these relationships and they're looking to dominate someone, and then either they can't dominate the person and they become addicted, hopelessly addicted to the idea of proving their value and worth to the other individual, which puts them in the losing end of an abusive relationship, or they quickly dominate the other party, and then they're like, oh shit, I need somebody else new. So they put this person who they believe they've dominated into a little box, and then they're kind of like, all right, cool, so what's next? What's new? And they're out searching for someone else to demonstrate value to. All of this traces back to the identity. When you live in the identity, when you live in the inner story, you're always the fucking star. Again, the socialization process, it grooms us to be raging narcissists. It grooms us to be raging narcissists. When you believe that you're the star, you always think you're more potent than you actually are. You think you're prettier, more beautiful than you are. You think you're stronger than you are. You think you're capable of things you're not even remotely capable of doing. You believe that you're potent in ways that you're not. When you're a narcissist, you look at somebody fighting like, I don't know, Israel Adesanya and John Jones, and here comes your dumbass with critiques on their performance. Like, in reality, you should know that you're not able to perform on the levels that they do, but in the inner story, oh, you're just as good as them. The inner story, it makes you psychotic. It makes you psychotic. It makes you aggressive. And why does it make you aggressive? It makes you go around trying to block out and defeat everything that conflicts with it, and has the potential to make you recognize your own frailty in reality. When you look at people who are like racist or nationalists and things of this nature, or just from any sort of aggressor group, you look at these people and you're like, dog, how do you not look at all of this evidence that demonstrates that the stories you base your aggression on are off. But they're lost in the inner story. They're lost in the inner story. They can't hear anything other than what says that they're right. Which brings us to the next point. The inner story, the identity, it runs on confirmation bias. The other day I put up a post wherein I said, the biggest problem with confirmation bias is that it jumps to whole conclusions based on partial information. It jumps to whole conclusions based on partial information. Anytime you get, especially with confirmation bias, as a result of narcissism, as a result of the identity, you get one little confirmation that you were right on one thing and you think you're right about everything. You sit here and you're like, oh, so it's just, it sets you up for failure every time. It sets you up for failure every time. You're right on one thing, so you must be right on everything. Narcissism. Or you're wrong on something, but you refuse to accept that you're wrong, so you block that thing out and do everything that you can to defeat that thing that says that you're not consistent with reality. Narcissism. Have you ever looked at someone just argue flat world theory or religion or sciencism, you know, treating science like a religion, and the motherfuckers don't know anything that they're talking about. They can't explain anything from outside their feelings and beliefs. The only thing that matters in this inner story is that they're right and they're good for believing the right things. The inner story is not organized mechanically. It isn't structurally sound. It's nebulous. You know the reason why so many people are afraid of gay people? Especially why so many dudes are afraid to be around dudes who are gay? Because the inner story, it's malleable, it's weak, it's easy to destroy. They think that if they hang around a gay dude, or they spend some time around a gay dude, then it's going to turn them gay. And if your frame of reference is really weak, which 9 times out of 10, for people who live in the identity usually is, there's a good possibility it turned true. The identity doesn't make you strong, it makes you weak. The more you sort of get lost in your internal narrative, the more you get shown things that reinforce the idea that you and what you believe is correct and true, and that everything that disagrees with you must be wrong or defective somehow, is the more divorced from reality you become. The deeper and deeper you dive into your social character, it's the more psychotic, the more random and irrational you become. It's dangerous. The more you live your life as a character, it's the less authentically you can live. It's the more dishonest you have to be in order to preserve this little story. It's the more deflective and aggressive you have to be, because everything has to go into protecting this story, right? Talk to a person who's really deeply immersed in their social character, and they experience cognitive dissonance whenever you make even the slightest criticism of their character. They go on the attack. They have to make you the wrong and defective party. They have to prove that you don't know what you're talking about and that you are somehow mistaken, or that you're weak or fragile or too sensitive, that you're somehow broken. You read through every fucking debate I've ever had on my page, and it's always cowardly ideologues, narcissists who come to me with their grief. Read through every debate. Tell me that isn't the pattern. I challenge you to. Yo, I see nobody has given me any shouts out yet. So it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm talking to I'm talking to an audience of no one. Might be. I'm not sure. But yeah, guys, the more you try to be a character of interest is the more you become psychotic and irrational and aggressive. In that way, you think like a parasite. You have to prove that you are the biggest personality in the room in order to be the most deserving of the rewards. Whoever's good is right. Whoever's right is the authority, and whoever's the authority deserves the most comforts, degrees of freedom, and satisfaction. Again, this is all mechanical. This is what it looks like from the inside of a disease looking out. The more you live your life as a character, the less honest you're allowed to be. You can't allow anything in that fundamentally threatens or undermines the story you tell yourself about the world around you and your place and value within it. It causes you to experience cognitive dissonance at an alarming rate. It ruins your life. Even worse, this isn't even the end of the Brother Khalid. My man. My man. I appreciate you, man. Thank you kindly. Yo. At the end of the day, this is how it works mechanically, man. This is how you learn how to this is how thinking like a parasite works from the ground level up. Everything goes back to consumption. And then access to consumption or entitlement to consumption. Entitlement to consumption has to do with who deserves the most. Who deserves the most? In any social scatterplot, who is the loudest variable? Who is the loudest variable? Who deserves the most? When you live in the identity, it's dangerous. It is dangerous. Because even worse, and this is the point that I was getting to earlier, you still have to deal with reality. Like, again, society and reality, mutually exclusive systems. All the shit that you guys do in the world right now, you're not just impacting other humans or other life forms on this planet. You're impacting the system of reality itself, and the consequences for aggressing against reality. Humans don't even have words and concepts to explain what those are. I do the best that I can, and I'm describing what I see, and I come up short. I come up way short, man. Like, it's bad. Get out of your identity. Start recognizing and syncing up with the world around you. Start recognizing and syncing up with reality, because, dude, you're in trouble. Like, there are entities waiting to get hands on you after, well, not hands, they don't have hands, but there are entities waiting to get hold of you once we're out of these bodies, just based on all the stupid shit you do in reality and in the world around you, because you live in these inner stories. You know, I was going to cut this a little short. Oh my God, I got my brother Doug in the house. Oh man, I'm glad that you love learning from me, bro. I love you too, man. Hey, my folk, man. Y'all, my people. Here's what we also got to take into consideration. And I was going to cut this at 30 minutes, but I'll let it go just a little bit longer. So I want you to take into consideration, gangbanger, like someone who just kills people, like just because they're lost in this inner story and this network of stories that exists between them and the groups that they frequent, right? In the inner story, killing someone from a rival gang is justice. They took from you, so you take back. in like, I guess, military culture, or at least corrupt military cultures, and this spans across the world. I'm not specifically talking about this country, but when people go around, soldiers say, "Hey, I'm allowed to murder and rape and kill and pillage." In the inner story, they're justified in doing these things. In reality, because someone told them in their mind, through systems of idealism, someone told them that they're the good guys. That they're good, and because others are bad, they can take their anger and frustrations out on them and destroy, murder, pillage, rape, kill, burn things to the ground, and it's all justified through the inner story. In reality, all of those imbalances that people caused and contributed to, they get charged back to the individual. They get charged back to the individual. But if you're living in your inner story, then, well, it all makes sense, doesn't it? You get to create your value system, don't you? You get to create your own sense of justice in the inner story. It's fair because I think it is. I'm good because they told me I am. I'm right because this thing says I am. You fuck around and really make some powerful enemies, including the most powerful enemy of all. I tell you this right now, humans, you do not want to knuckle up with reality. You don't. Your arms are not long enough to box with God. Your arms are not long enough to box with God. That is a battle you lose every time. There's no statistic to apply to it. You lose it every time. It's only a degree of how bad you lose. But anywho, yeah, man. So, guys, y'all know what it is. I am on social media. You can catch me on Facebook, on Instagram. You can catch me on YouTube, obviously, and then I'm also on Medium as well. I produce tons of content, just trying to get all these principles out. I don't even know how many principles I'll be able to share during this lifetime. I don't even know how much time I have in this body, to be honest. I really don't. I'm just doing what I can. If you'd like to see me reach a higher platform and be able to reach more people, you can always join the Patreon family. I'm at Avatar Cycle XIII. You can find me there, Donald King, on Patreon as well. And I'll post a link before too long. But it's like, if you also just appreciate what I'm doing and you just want to send your bro a little bit of love, like, hey, man, I appreciate what you did, you can always hit me up on Cash App. Again, everything goes to building this up to a larger platform so that we can help as many people as possible. Because whether we like it or not, we're not going to be in these bodies forever. Again, I don't like making promises on behalf of reality. I would never be so arrogant. But from what I'm able to see through this perspective, anything you do to help assist reality in being heard and or help the entity performing through me to be heard, it works in your favor towards reversing negative impacts you've made on the world around you. Believe it, don't believe it, I'm just describing what I see. So I'm not trying to sell you on that. I'm not trying to get rich off of this. I'm trying to reach people. So yeah. Also, my mannerisms are very funny. I've been thinking I'm funny, but I'm not, man. It's like, I'm saying, man, it's an amalgamation of characters I've seen in media through the years. It's hilarious. Anyway, again, I genuinely love and appreciate you all. It's this isn't an easy thing to do. When you understand that everybody lives in their inner story and that the things you have to tell them is necessarily going to threaten, or the things you have to tell them are necessarily going to threaten their inner story, and you know that it's going to trigger them and make them hostile and angry towards you, you got to get your balls up before you decide to speak truth. Again, truth is what's consistent with reality. Truth is what's consistent with reality. Honesty is the individual's will and effort to recognize and sync up with reality. Idealism is the inner world. It's the inner world at the individual and group levels. Okay? Most people want to live their lives in idealism. Most people want to live their lives in idealism, and, well, when they're living their lives as these characters of interest in these stories playing out between different people on the face of the planet, they end up fucking shit up. They're trying to do for them, kind of like corporations, multinational corporations. They're trying to win in the game of who can capture the most resources, and look at all the damage they cause to the world just being narcissistic little shits. That doesn't go unanswered. Reality is the perfect accountant. Any imbalance you cause or contribute to, it gets charged back to you with interest. Interest you can't even begin to fathom. Come out of the internal narrative, y'all. That is my show for today. I appreciate you tuning in, my brothers. I appreciate y'all. Much love to you, and have yourselves a wonderful evening, all right? All right, night.